All I did was just one short piece of paper here. And there's a few things that I wrote down a little while ago, thinking about Russ. By the way, my name is Glenn Beggs, and I've only knew Russ for 13 years. Thank you. I met Russ, or Jane and I met Russ and Diane in Embassy Park in Largo, Florida. Clearwater, Florida, actually, because half of the park is Clearwater, half of the park is Largo. I met Russ before Diane had actually seen the house that they were buying. And he came over and started talking to me, asked me a few questions about the park. And I told him what it was like. And from there, he took off, went back up. I believe they were staying with Art and Julie. And the next day, Russ came back down with Diane. And he was out in the backyard, and he was looking at my orange tree. He wanted to plant an orange tree, so he thought, okay, I'll plant an orange tree. He asked me all about the orange tree. Well, I'm telling you, I know nothing about oranges. This tree was there, and it had red things on it, or orange things on it, and I used to take it off and eat it in the morning. And that was all I knew about oranges. Russ started to talk. As you know, Russ could talk. He started to talk, and he told me a lot of things about what he had done in his life. A few things that he really enjoyed, and a few things that weren't so good, and I could relate to it. But actually, Russ and I had very, very little in common. Russ worked in the steel plant, as Nate talked about. He worked at Atlas. He operated the crane, and he fed or stoked the fires with the iron, whatever. I, on the other hand, worked the opposite way. I was a firefighter, and I fought the fires, put them out. So we had actually nothing in common there. He talked about things that he liked to do, and I happened to mention to him that I used to play in a band. And he asked me what I played. I told him I played guitar. He said, well, I play guitar too. I said, oh, that's great. We'll have to get together one night. He said, well, the only problem is we don't have any guitars down here. I said, well, neither do I. So what did he do? He went out and bought a guitar. And if I'm not mistaken, Norm, is that the Yami? Is that the Yamaha? No, that's the Martin. He bought a Yamaha guitar. And he came over and he says to me, well, I bought a guitar. Well, I didn't have a guitar down with me. I have 6 at home, but I didn't have a guitar. Now Russ he's got a guitar. So I said, okay, I'll go out and I'll buy one. So here we are, we end up buying another guitar, like I need a guitar, like I need another hole in the head. So I bought a guitar, and we sat around, and he asked me if I could show him some more chords. And he knew a few chords, but he didn't know enough chords. So anyway, I said, sure, I'll teach you some chords. So I started showing him chords, and he says to me, how do you do this one? So I showed him an A minor. And I said, now, if you want to really make it nice, go on up the neck, use your baby finger. He said, what? I said, use your baby finger. You don't use your baby finger to play guitar. He said, that baby finger there, it hurts every time I touch a string. So I said, okay, then don't use your baby finger. I said, you'll have to play a 7th chord with another finger. You don't have enough fingers, Russ. So he never, ever, ever would play a chord where he had to use his baby fingers. So anyway, we got enough songs together. We decided one night that we would go over to the rec hall, and we would have, he called it a practice. I called it a dance. What the heck, why not? So we went over and we started to play some songs. People came in. Guy and Lise they were our fans. We had about 20 people, 25 people there, and we started to play these songs. We had there was Russ, there was Arlene Stewart, Jeff McKay, myself, and Paul Swan. And we got up there and we played the number of songs that we knew, which was probably 20, 25 songs. So as time went on, we got more and more songs down, and it became a Friday night or a Saturday night event that we would have once a month. We would get up there and play. We had a really, really good time. But it got to the point where Russ liked the old stuff, the old country and western. I, of course, was brought up in the 60s. I liked rock and roll. So he didn't want to play the old rock and roll. He wanted to play the old stuff. He went off, got Diane, and she ended up buying a piano or a keyboard, and they started having their own show with their own band. And it was fantastic. But just going back before they started this, I remember with Russ when we first met, we were out one day I think we were going to Home Depot, and he said to me, "You got the radio on awfully loud." Now I didn't have it on loud, but I had it on music. And I said to him, "Well, I like to listen to the music." He said, "I never have music on at all. Never, ever have it on." And I said, "Well, what do you do in the car?" He said, "Oh, I just think." So, okay, that's fine. When we started to play, all of a sudden, now Russ had a radio out in his driveway. That radio was on for at least 16 hours a day. He was obsessed with music. Finally learned that he liked music. I remember one time walking into the house in Florida, and he said to me, "Come on and have a look at where I practice." I went down to the room, and this was a spare room that he had, and all it was, there was pictures of guitars, there was records, old records that he had hung on the wall. Everything was music related. One thing about Russ that I learned when I first met him was, if he did it, he was in for a penny or in for a pound. He was obsessed. He became one of the better people to sit back and say to him, "Practice this here," because he would practice for hours and get it down. They started doing their own shows with Diane and Paul Swan, and I left the park. So when I left the park, I used to do some of the DJ dances. So I said to them, "You're going to have to get somebody else to do it." Russ and Diane, they took it over. Well, I had a DJ setup, and it was a very professional setup. Russ went out, used the laptop computer, and he had 3,500 songs that he had. He had a whole pile of songs. Unbelievable the amount that he did. When he did everything to the nth degree. No matter what he did, he just did it to the maximum. After he started doing that I went and I moved to another park. We used to come back and forth. We were only close. And the one thing that I did like, we used to go around by their place. And as soon as we got there, we'd get out and they'd be sitting out in the driveway and he'd say, "Do you want a coffee?" No, Russ, I don't want. "Do you want an NA?" Russ was like myself. He didn't drink. So he used to drink non-alcoholic beer. So we'd sit there and we'd have a couple of NAs and we would talk. And we would talk for hours and hours. And that's one thing, if I can remember anything or want to remember anything about Russ, was the talks, because we could talk. And I'm going to keep this short. If I can say one thing that I really, really miss, I miss talking to Russ. That's his hat. You can't play music without a hat. Russ, you're up there now. You're up there with Paul. You're up there with Arlene. Start playing some of the old songs. Thank you.